Namaste. This is Yoga Therapy Podcast, and I'm your host, Shira Cohen, yoga teacher, yoga therapist, and Ayurvedic wellness educator. In these conversations with experts in the field of yoga therapy, you'll find out what it is and how it can help you and your loved ones to reclaim well-being. We'll touch on physical as well as mental health, physiology, emotions, women's health, spiritual well-being, goddesses, and self-development in the fullest sense. Listening to another story can change ours, so thank you for showing up, and let's begin this journey together. So, hello everyone. Today we are joined by Keirin Brown. So she is originally from New York. She's now in Mexico City. She's going to tell us all about how she got there. She's a somatic life coach and a yoga therapist. So thank you for being here, Keirin.
Thank you so much for having me, Shira. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you.
Yes, me too. We're just having a lovely talk, and we have a lot in common, I think, and we understand each other very well because we both have hippie parents. So
That's right, exactly.
That can bring a whole load of experiences. So tell us your story. How did you get to yoga? How did it become yoga therapy? When did somatic coaching come into this?
Yeah, so I would say what drew me to yoga initially was my anxiety.
Okay, yes.
I originally come from acting and from the theater, so there was always and dance, and so there was always movement, and that was always what was the way I connected to characters, or my art was through the body, through movement.
Oh, wow.
But what really drew me to yoga specifically in my own practice, I will say my dad is a yoga teacher. He studied, from interval yoga. Yeah, so exactly. But, as at any normal teenager, I was very rebellious against my dad's career and teaching. So I did not study with him. But yeah, I really started getting immersed in yoga when I first moved to Los Angeles, which was in 2005. My anxiety was so out of control. I had always had anxiety, although I think I hadn't had as much awareness about it. I started taking yoga classes in my little neighborhood, and I noticed how different I felt afterwards. I would be able to feel more regulated and grounded and more in my body and able to function. So I got into the yoga program there. And so I was certified in 2008 and started teaching after that. I started to research yoga therapy, and I became a yoga therapist in, I think it was 2012, 2014 at Loyola Marymount.
We have exactly the same timeline. So I started practicing when I was 15. I did yoga therapy training in 2013. Yeah.
Oh yeah, we're on the same trajectory here. And what drew me specifically to yoga therapy is in my teaching and in my practice, really what became more of my passion and my strength, and what I drew out in people was the ability to connect to their emotions as they're moving their bodies. And the same for myself. I mean, that's what brought me to it, was my emotional experience. And so I was curious about yoga therapy as maybe a place to marry the more Western therapy with more Eastern history and therapy. And what I loved about Loyola Marymount is we would on Saturdays study with a Western doctor, and on Sundays it would be an Eastern doctor of some sort. So it was like, to me, such an interesting merging of the two.
Oh, I've never heard of that, but that's great.
Yeah. And then after I got my certification in yoga therapy, I would say it was like a very, as anything, if you let it, became a very organic process where I was teaching private clients. I was also teaching at corporations, and I was teaching yoga but then it started to, people would start to share their lives with me, what they were going on, they were going through. And so then it started to be maybe more talking and then moving the body. And then from there, I started also studying with various spiritual teachers, Kahn, Pema Chodron, these kinds of people, and found that the work that I do now more as a somatic coach is, I would say it's yoga on the most subtle level, because when I'm working with people somatically, we're not necessarily moving the body, but we're going in with such deep awareness to the body that, and we are moving energy, right? But we're not necessarily moving the body through yoga poses. So I do both. I work with people who want to, move their bodies through yoga therapy, but also the majority of my work is through, this somatic work, which is much more subtle, but extremely effective. And
can we, for listeners who don't know what somatic work is, or just explain what the difference is, because yoga therapy can be very somatic, or it should be.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you know what, I feel like, it's so interesting because of course, no practitioner is the same. Yeah. And so it's such a great question you asked, Shira, because it's like, my interpretation of that is going to be completely different than yours. Or and the same goes for the client. There's no human that experiences the same way. So for me, when I'm working with yoga therapy, we are actually working through the poses. There is conversation depending on how much the client wants to share about what they're going through. Now that may be more physical. Oh, I have a lot of back pain. My hips are really tight. Now I'm always aware of, as I ask people, how deep they want to go. Someone might not want to share what they're experiencing emotionally, and they are just coming for yoga, but still I can have a sense of, oh, this is a person who's working with a lot of anxiety. We need to ground, we need to work through the poses that are, slower, or maybe we need to move energy for someone who's feeling stuck. But that's, it really is yoga.
Very individual. Yeah.
And it's so individual. Absolutely. With the somatic work that I'm doing, it's, and like I said, more subtle. I feel like it's like a beautiful meeting of, therapy, like talk therapy and yoga, for me, because we'll sit there, we'll talk about what the client is experiencing and going through. And then I'll ask them to, if they can, contact their body and share with me where they're experiencing that emotion in their bodies.
Interesting.
And, maybe they're sharing about a breakup. We were talking about that a little before we started the call. They might be sharing about a breakup and sharing what they're experiencing emotionally. And before we go on to necessarily every single circumstance that's coming up in the breakup, I might ask them, as you're talking about this, what are you experiencing in your body right now? So it's a lot about beginning to contact body awareness.
Yeah.
As you talk about emotions. And then, depending on the client's experience, we may close the eyes and it's kind of a guided, I wouldn't say meditation. At first it might be to ground, but then we'll say, okay, you might be feeling, my throat is where I'm really feeling it. It feels, so tense in my throat. So we might go in and ask, like, are there colors there? Are there shapes? Is there anything it's doing? Is there anything it wants to say? And then often the question of, when did you first experience this, is very profound, because so often when we're going through emotion, as I'm sure you know in your work, it's not a new emotion. That's what I always ask. Is this a new emotion you've never experienced before? Or is this a familiar emotion? And I would say 99% of the time, people share, and I know in my own experience, my own practice, I share, this is a really ancient feeling. I've been feeling it for as long as I can remember.
Okay, that's interesting. I've never thought about it being old or new, but as you're talking about it, I'm like thinking, this last few years since I've been more aware of those. So I would call this, what you're talking about, it's like visceral awareness.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
And yeah, I've been very much focused on visceral awareness these last few years because I want to understand how emotions are, if we're translating them into bioenergy and into physiological processes. So which hormones are being released and how's that affecting our whole chemistry, and what kind of energetic charge would that produce in our body? Is that a draining? Is that a lifting? Is it expanding? And how can we actually work with that so it's not that we waste that energy, because it's already there. Let's use it, let's recycle.
I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And what you just said, I think, we were talking a little before, you have a lot of curiosity, experience, and interest in the physiology. And I love what you're sharing about more the chemistry of the body.
Mm-hmm.
What you were sharing about the hormones, like what hormones are being released.
Mm-hmm.
I feel in my work with myself and in my body awareness, I can notice when there's like the rush of cortisol. I can feel when
adrenaline or the
adrenaline. Yeah, it's so clear to me. And I am able to then connect when I feel the release of that. And instead of just reacting, right? Because I think anxiety is we're moving too fast.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what culture in our society does in general. It's like, it just moves you so fast. And so if we can slow down a little bit and say, oh, okay, I'm feeling the cortisol, instead of I'm anxious, what do I need to fix in my life? I had that conversation. What do I need to say? I think we immediately go to problem solve on the external. And that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, it has a function.
It has a function.
But it can be overriding that emotional charge that you've just now released in your body. And I just want to come back to what you're saying. So the cortisol's there, and instead of moving on and finding a solution, ride the wave,
Yeah.
You can ride.
Yeah. And for me, I feel like it's such an invitation. It's not like necessarily one we want, right? Nobody wants to feel anxious or angry or overwhelmingly sad these are what I might call unwanted feelings, but they are an invitation. And so when I feel that maybe rush of cortisol, especially since I have such a history of anxiety, it's an invitation to slow down and to say, okay, what's happening here? Where am I feeling this in my body? What is the motion of the energy? Is it rushing up, the left side of my body, for example? And that's when I go, when's the first time I felt this? And usually there may be a memory associated with that. And for me, what I find, and in my work, there's also the inner child need that starts to come out in that too. So it's all connected.
Mm-hmm. And that's what you meant with that old story. The inner child needs
because I feel
and felt and supported.
Absolutely. I feel the inner child is very much alive and well in our bodies. It can manifest in a way that's creative. The inner child is essentially our creativity. It's our inner artist. But it can also be what comes out, with these core wounds, with these needs that are not being met, where we start to seek these needs in the external world. Yeah. And really, we're trying to go to the source where we can learn how to hear what the inner child needs and how to provide that reassurance, that safety, that love, that sense of I will not abandon you again, maybe the way I have in the past.
Yeah. So I was reading this in your on your website, and you were talking about feelings, relationships, and self-abandonment, boundaries. And so how does embodied awareness and somatic movement practice help this? How do we help this? So you're saying we're going to move with it. What else do you think that's so powerful about this that talk therapy can't do?
Well, I will say so many of the clients that come to me are already and maybe still in talk therapy or have at some point been through it. And I think it's so powerful because when they come with that experience, they're coming with a knowledge and awareness of maybe their history and their pain and where it comes from. There's a lot of connections they've already made. But a lot of times what I find is there's a frustration. Okay, I have all of this awareness. I know that the reason I go for this kind of person in relationships is because I had this experience in my childhood, but why can't I stop doing it? You know, there's this frustration. So I feel like the work that we're talking about with the somatics and the connection to your body, there's an ability, if you have this experience, to integrate the inner child into the way you're functioning on a daily basis.
Okay.
That you don't have to micromanage yourself as much anymore. You don't have to go, oh, I always go for this kind of person. That's bad. I need to do that. You're not micromanaging yourself. There's an integration. There's oh, I'm feeling this rush, for example. I'm talking a bit about relationships here because I do feel it's such a core of life and it's a lot of the work I do. But let's say I'm feeling a rush in my relationship. I'm feeling an anxiety. I feel a fear of abandonment. Maybe I'm able to identify that. And then instead, again, of going to my partner or a partner to fix that, I might go, okay, I might slow down and say to my inner child. And the inner child, by the way, I feel, I actually place a hand on my body wherever I feel that inner child coming up. Okay. And having a conversation and a reassurance, because the inner child feeling abandoned, which is, some of us, we all have different histories and traumas. Abandonment is a huge one.
Yeah. We're a social species. We need connection. Yeah. And
absolutely,
the first relationship with parents is a sense of abandonment, even if they didn't abandon you, but I felt, for example, very emotionally abandoned.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So my parents were loving and wonderful. There was that emotional disconnection. So
absolutely. Yeah. We can hold space for all of it. We can hold space for all that was beautiful and wonderful about our parents and what they did their best on. And we can also hold space for where we didn't get what we needed. And I feel like not only do we feel abandoned by our parent when we're young, but often if we feel abandoned when we're young in some way, we internalize that. And so we start to abandon ourselves in order to get the love externally from our parent, which you have to give a child the benefit of the doubt. That's a survival mechanism. But when we get older and we're still functioning off this survival mechanism of needing to get love from the outside, it's maladaptive, absolutely. So we're trying to shift that, and where we may then start to provide a sense of, you're safe with me. It's a relationship between adult self and inner child self, who are very much alive and well in our bodies.
Yeah, totally. I believe that too. I think that's the most important thing, is to remind people that they're not broken, and we're not broken, and the source of power and beauty is always within us. And it's just learning to access that again and again and again until that becomes a pathway, rather than we've been taught to look at everything that's wrong with us.
That's so beautiful. And I love that I think that's really important and powerful that you share that we're not broken, because I feel like there's a misconception, and we can even as practitioners or people in the wellness, self-help world, if you're on that path, sometimes I think we can think of healing as almost this new way to fix ourselves, right? Where it's like,
never good enough.
I'll finally get there when blah, 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 never good enough. Absolutely. Yeah. So for me, healing is a returning, because there is nothing broken. There is nothing that needs to be fixed. It's almost like taking off layers of the ways we've adapted
and
to survive.
Yeah, we've been conditioned, and it's not
Conditioning.
our parents. Yeah, it's not our parents' fault. They've been conditioned by their parents, and then if you look at the big societal picture, we've just been conditioned by a culture that is all about domination. Basically, I read a really great book. What's it called? Nurturing Our Humanity, and and in it they talk about partnership systems, which are very small societies usually, and our Western culture, which is now a global culture, which is all about domination and this infantilizing and making people not dependent.
Stripping that powerlessness, which is interesting because powerlessness is such a sense of it comes out, it manifests in anger, right? And you feel powerless
or shame,
shame, depending on how you adapt it.
You have no autonomy, so either you go on one end of the spectrum, or you can be too arrogant and proud.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is just a defense mechanism, really, which again is all about, okay, how can I return to provide this inner child with, or my body? Sometimes I feel like those words are kind of interchangeable, inner child, body, true deep self, emotional self. There's so many different, it really depends on what resonates for you, but it's a sense of providing that vulnerable, open, pure innocence of self, the love that he, she, they always have needed.
Yeah. And it's funny, I was just listening to JBrown. Do you listen to JBrown's podcast?
No, but I would need to know.
Yeah, I'll put it in the notes as well. He was speaking to Amy Matthews. She's from New York. Do you know her?
No.
Okay, well, they were talking about somatics and embodied experiences, and also about source and inner child. And it's very funny. You just remind me of this conversation. And that words can mean different things to different people. So that somatic experience and awareness and healing can be many words used to describe that process. It's a process. Yeah,
absolutely. That's why when working with people too, I always, someone might say, oh, I'm feeling angry, let's say, and I'll say, oh, well, what is that experience like for you? Because the way I feel angry is going to be different than the way you feel or understand anger. Anger might be very empowering for me. It might be very shame-provoking for you. Who knows? So to understand, words are beautiful, but they mean different things to different people.
Yes, that's also important. Yeah. And do you kind of explain this to people in a session? Do you?
I don't, because
not enough time.
Well, no, I would say I do, but after the experience, because I feel because so much is intellectualized, it's exciting to understand things, but I always say, let's understand it later. Let's experience it now. So the idea being that, we'll experience something, and then, we'll go through the experience with the inner child, with the connecting with our bodies, with the feeling of the energy moving, with the maybe visualizations of what is the energy moving, what is it maybe even expressing in words or sound. And then later, after that's over in the session, we might say, what was that like? What did it mean? There may be understanding, there may be some explanation.
Yeah, so they can digest it and then mentally understand it and verbalize it.
Yeah, I mean, in my own experience, I feel like my brain loves to jump in and make sense of things. And I love that because I'm curious and I like to understand things. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I've noticed that because of my own experience in my life of, and in my childhood of having to be very hyper vigilant, I experienced an unsafe environment, that my brain always trying to understand things is another way that I've become hypervigilant. So trying to ask myself, is this my brain trying to figure things out and get ahead of me? Or is this what I'm actually experiencing in my body? Is a differentiation.
Yeah, and I think when you experience it in your body, you are digesting it. That is the process of release.
That's it. That's it. And that's exactly why I feel like somatic work is such a beautiful way to integrate your understandings, because you may understand things in therapy, and that may help you start to shift your patterns, which is so helpful and powerful and necessary. But the digestion you're talking about, I often use the word integration, is one that starts to naturally and organically happen for you, where you don't have to, as you said before, micromanage yourself as much.
Yeah. And you don't need to re-trigger the trauma by thinking about it or talking about it. Yeah. You just sit through the body.
And you can return to the safety that you start to create in your system, the nervous system safety, rather than, yes, exactly as you said, triggering the experience yet again, remembering the steps. That's a lot of mental gymnastics.
That's the mind. The mind is an acrobat,
it is so true.
Yes, it loves to show off. I catch myself doing it all the time, and then I'm like, oh, that's my mind. I'm trying to prove it.
That's it. Right, which isn't, it's not a bad thing, but it is certainly something to have awareness around.
And when do you use it? When it's contextual.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you see this working in your clients? How do you see them shifting?
Yeah. Of course, as we said before, every client is different, so the process for each person is so different. But what I will say is there's a slowing down and an effortlessness that begins to happen in their lives, because we may have a session where they're able to, as we've been seeing, integrate their mental understanding of their history with their physical experience, their emotional experience in their bodies, so that they don't feel like they have to be on hyper alert all the time. So they start to feel much more relaxed. And the main thing is operating from an embodied self-love versus self-abandonment. So making choices. So maybe instead of being like, okay, I have to fix my patterns, I have to learn how to make boundaries, I have to, all of these things, which are so powerful to this kind of work. However, if you're always operating from a deep listening of self and knowing these are I am able to hear my need, I feel uncomfortable in this situation, recognizing the need, step 1, 2, honoring it by saying, I hear you. And then 3, what am I going to do about it? What's the action I'm going to take if I feel uncomfortable around a person, for example? I might question what's making me feel uncomfortable, and I might need to remove myself from that situation. And in doing that, that's embodied self-love, because you're listening to yourself, you're honoring it through action. So then your nervous system, your inner child, whatever words you may want to choose, start to feel safe. And so you're not needing to go, okay, what's the boundary I need to set here? It's like you simply listen to what you need and you figure out how to honor that. And that can become integrated in a way that you don't need to think about it as much as you need to listen maybe to the self.
Yeah, and even now we're having this conversation, I'm noticing my brain is going, and then I'm not listening. I'm just thinking of what I should be responding or what I should be asking, rather than just feel and let it sink in. And that's also this training that we've had. We've always got to be ready to respond or react.
Yeah.
And you were talking about anxiety and taking action. And I think that's a really important point that people should take home is when you feel anxious, it's because you need to take a step. And if we don't make that step, we're just going to spiral around and feel paralyzed and get this thing of thinking in the future, but never doing it. And that just makes this molehill into a mountain.
Yeah, the anxiety is an invitation. It's an opportunity. It's usually a cover. I believe I experience it as a cover emotion. So it may be, you know, that there's something underneath that needs it's attention. It's calling your attention. So there may be an action that needs to be, as you were saying, taken in order to shift some energy in your external world, or there may be a deeper listening that needs to occur to what the emotion is underneath.
It's like fear. Fear asks you to stop, look, listen, and then decide which direction am I going to go that's safe for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. But the stop, right, is what we miss. You know, in our society, the way we're really trained to and praised for going, right, and productivity. And I think what we're connecting with, what we're talking about is pause, maybe, you know, stop, slow down, and then instead of reacting, responding in a way that is authentic to you. And that's how you take your next step forward in the world.
Yeah, and by feeling like, so I was saying to Keiren before that I'm going through a breakup, and it's funny because I never say this in my class, but now I'm going to say it in every class, is breathe, feel, let go. And it just came out, and I was like, that's what I should be doing myself, you know, breathe, feel, really feel it. So stop, feel it, and let it go without.
That's powerful. I love that. And you know, because we don't, these unwanted feelings, right? We don't want to feel them, and that's okay. You don't have to want to feel heartbroken in order to move that emotion, you know, and emotion is energy
in
motion. So, but if we don't feel it, if we try and skip that part, which we all want to, I don't want to feel that stuff. Who does? But if we don't feel it, it can't move, you know, it just gets locked in there, stuck in there.
And then it becomes a pattern, and then it stays in our system, our nervous system. I love you just said that. Our nervous system is our inner child. And have you ever read Judith Anodea's work? She works a lot with chakras and Eastern, Western.
No, I haven't read her work.
Okay, and she also said how the child was treated by the parents, the mind treats the body. And that's also very...
I love that. I mean, I use different words.
Same thing.
I use different words, and the words are the adult self and the inner child, but it's the same thing. It's like how we're speaking to ourselves, that inner dialogue that we're having on a daily basis about anything. You get in somebody's way at the grocery store. Are you saying like, oh, that was so, you know, silly? Or are you saying I'm such an idiot, you know, those people probably think I'm stupid? Or, you know, what is the inner dialogue? Shining some light on that. But absolutely, that's right. It's that, how am I treating that part of myself?
And so let's go into relationships. Why do relationships trigger that?
Oh yeah, I mean,
big question though, that we could cover a lot.
That's the core ground, right? Because our romantic relationships are where we are triggering and experiencing our core needs and our core wounds. It's where we experience all over again the deep needs and love that we were looking for, whether we received it or not, or in some sort of imbalanced way when we were children. So relationships, and I work with people either going through breakup or divorce or even if they are in a relationship, but what it's triggering and bringing up for them, because it's such fertile ground. It's like all this stuff that you feel when you're going through something that's triggering an emotion. It's like someone's taken a spotlight on your core stuff. So it's a great opportunity.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel good. Nobody likes it again. And I say that because I think it's important to acknowledge that. A lot of times we feel acceptance and working with acceptance and emotions is like, oh, I need to like this. I think you can simultaneously say, I hate this. I wish this was any other way. I don't like this. I don't want to feel this, but this is what's happening right now. And that is what radical acceptance and work with yourself and emotions is about.
Yeah. I'm just writing down radical acceptance. I love that one.
Yeah.
And we don't have enough of it. And I think the other thing is we have to remember that when we're having these romantic or intimate relationships, the first experiences of intimacy was with parent or caretaker. So that is why we've been imprinted with whatever that is. And that's why we're attracted also to the people who trigger that within us if there is trauma, because we need to work it out. Yeah.
And we're trying to, again, we're not trying to fix ourselves to make ourselves perfect, to have the perfect relationship. That is a fairy tale and there's no such thing. Yeah. But what we are trying to do is, and that's a lot of pressure if you think that there is, on yourself and on your relationship and the other person. But what we are trying to do is make the unconscious conscious. And that's what I feel conscious relationships are. It's knowing that, let's say I never felt safe, just using this as an example. Let's say someone says, I never felt safe in my household when I was a child. I just wanted to feel cared for, taken care of, safe, which, by the way, of course, everybody wants to feel and deserves to feel. Yeah. But if you are not aware of this deep core need to feel cared for and taken care of, you may be on some level seeking a partner that will fill the role of the parent. And the reality is no partner should ever have to be your parent. They're your partner. You don't want to be infantilized, and your partner doesn't want to be the parent, or vice versa. Mm-hmm. So we're not trying to create a perfect self or a perfect partnership, but we are trying to make the unconscious needs conscious, so we can understand what we can fulfill ourselves and what we can look for in the outside world and partnerships.
Yeah, that's an important point. And I also think there's that aspect that we have different needs, and we need to know what they are. So my needs being met and your needs being met, we require different things. So if I show you love, for example, by giving you a hug, but that's actually what I want that hug. And the other person wants love to be shown by doing something nice for them, but you're always hugging them and they feel that's irritating. You know what I mean? So
or let's say the other person, in this great example you're bringing forward, let's say the other person felt very dominated by their parent and didn't have any freedom when they were a child. If you in this scenario we're working with here, if you as a partner are constantly hugging and needing more, that person's going to feel triggered in a way where they don't feel autonomy and freedom. They're feeling controlled. So it's like, of course, I do believe we attract partners that trigger these wounds in a way that, but the key is of course, you don't want to be in an abusive situation where you're just triggering each other left and right and nobody has any kindness or consciousness or responsibility. The key is to take responsibility for our wounds and our needs and how we're bringing them in the world, and then to be able to talk about them with our partner, and for them to have the space to do the same, and to understand how we work that out in dynamics, and to have maybe a little more responsibility for what is my need and how am I projecting that on you. I mean, it's complex in a way, but it's also very simple in that it's
It
about
doesn't have to be complex at all.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's what you just said. A really important point is communication and the willingness of both partners to take the time to communicate and understand, okay, what just happened? You know, you can talk about it and then find ways to deal with it. And I think that's lacking in a lot of people, but that's also, again, back to awareness and being
that's number one. That's the step, right? I mean, you can't communicate anything if you don't have an awareness of what's coming up for you. You need to communicate within yourself, and that comes back to that adult, self with the inner child, understanding the needs, being loving and caring, creating safety, all of that within yourself. And then you can say, hey, to your partner, this is what I'm feeling in this situation. What's coming up for you. And then, of course, if you are going through a divorce or breakup where like, you're not working with your partner, the partner is out of the picture, but what the pain is triggering in us is so illuminating. It's like, oh, this is the part of me that's calling out for attention.
Yeah, and that's the part I need to heal. So I've come across this in books, but also just in my own experiences and seeing it with people, is we keep going back to the same situations because trauma is just us trying to heal. We're trying to reconcile that lost part of ourselves. The feel
so innocent. It's really, I think we have to have a lot of compassion for ourselves, because it's simply our innocence attempting to heal. Yeah, it's so beautiful. I think we can be really light and gentle with it. Like, oh, here I go again. Oh, look at me. Oh, that's so sweet.
But even the word trauma has become such a big, like, oh my God, she's traumatized, or they have a trauma. But it's a beautiful thing if we see it as actually the body mind trying to reconcile the aspect of self that we've discarded or abandoned or rejected or cut off from ourselves.
I love that you say that. I think that's so important. There are parts of us that fragment, right, when we're a child, because of whatever experiences we may live through. There may have been a part of ourselves that our parents, for whatever reason, as far as their history and their capability, there may be a part of yourself that your parents rejected. Let's say you were never allowed to be angry, and that when you were angry, you were sent away to your room. That was bad. Then you may start to fragment. Oh, the part of me that feels angry, or feels whatever even the source of the anger, you start to fragment it off, which means you abandon that part of yourself. So we're trying to bring wholeness of self together, where every single aspect of self has the right to be loved, cared for, has the right to be here. Every emotion has the right to be here as long as it needs to be. And that's what I always tell the emotions within me and tell the emotions within my client, or ask them to tell their emotions, that you can be here as long as you want to be, to the emotion. Let's say it's anger. Okay, you can get as big as you need to get. You can be here as long as you need to be. And I'm not going anywhere. I'll be here with you. And that's that integration, instead of fragmenting. Oh, I don't like that person I don't like that part of me. Discard, discard, discard. No, we're bringing self back into wholeness.
And how important do you think it is that there is someone in the room with the person who has this disconnect? Can they do it alone? This has always been my question. How important is it to have, or a therapist, or a partner, or someone who can hold that space for you to reintegrate that self?
I think is a beautiful question. I think it can be both, but I will say there is such power in being witnessed in the moments where you have the most shame. Whatever part of ourselves we discard, we think is unacceptable, if another person, whether it be a therapist or a healer or yoga therapist or whatever it may be, your partner even, although it's not necessarily a responsibility, but it can be a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
They're able to witness you being that ugly part of you and they don't go anywhere. That's extremely healing. And you can learn then, I think it may be important to experience that first with another, maybe somebody who's can guide you through this. And then you may learn to do it also on your own. I know that's personally been my own experience of, working with my healers and having someone to witness me, my therapists in the past. Now I'm able to do that for myself too. I think both, I still need both.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. All right. Okay. And so I would like to finish with something written on your website. I don't know if you wrote it, but pain is fertile ground for your most radical and loving transformation. So, was that yours?
I believe so. Yeah. I didn't quote it. So it came out of somewhere in the depths. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's one of those things that in so many words is said in many different ways. But yeah, I absolutely feel that way. It's again, what we don't want to feel, and we can have a lot of compassion for that. But pain and being with our pain is a way to heal abandonment, a way to reconnect not only with our internal selves, but also to know how to connect to others from a vulnerable, true, authentic space. And that's why, a lot of the work I do is with people who have been through a divorce or a breakup. I myself, having been through a divorce, that was the most radical invitation for transformation in my life. I hated every step of the beginning of the pain. Don't get me wrong. It was like burning in the fire, it really is. But that's only because it's burning your perception of yourself, your ego away. And it's bringing you home to your true authentic self, which is the space you want to operate from when you're making choices in your life. Where do I want to be? Who do I want to be with? What do I want my days to look like? Asking those questions, you can't answer them unless you are able to be with your authentic self, which often requires this kind of burning in this existential fire. Surviving it, right? That's dark night of the soul. Surviving it, making it through.
Yeah, because it really feels like that at that time. So for me, I have had that. Well, I've had that with a partner, but I've had it more with my burnout. For me, that was the dark night of the soul. Really seeing all the things that hold you back, all the ways you've deceived yourself, even in the most subtle. Maybe it was very subtle, but still, it was deception. It was a lie. It was.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it doesn't have to be a breakup that is the catalyst. Anything like this where you almost, of course, we don't want to have to reach our breaking point in order to have these, deeper integrations with self. But, when it does happen, let's say, if you are in that moment in your life right now, whether it be burnout or heartbreak, or it could be anything, some sort of family dissolution, then if you are in that moment, acknowledging it just is sucky, but it's also going to be, if you let it be, your biggest opportunity for transformation and for a life, and transformation to a life that is from your authentic self.
Yeah. And you have to release so many things for that to happen.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's, as you said before, it's a, kind of taking off the layers of our conditioning. Returning home. That's healing. Returning home to true self.
Yeah. So Do you want to guide us through a practice?
Oh, well, sure. Yeah. So, what I think may be helpful to give an experience of what you and I have been talking about a bit, Shira, is to have a moment to connect with the inner child from the very moment you are in today.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll just take a few minutes to do that. Obviously, usually this is like a longer practice, but we can have a taste and experience of it.
Great.
So
I'll mute myself. Okay.
okay, yeah. So we'll just we'll close our eyes. We want to take a moment to ground because we've been just listening. There's been a lot of thoughts. So we want to take a moment to ground in the body so we can feel the feet on the floor, how your feet rest on the earth. We can feel the grounded, sturdy energy of earth flowing up through the soles of the feet, beginning to flow up through the legs until it rests at the core body, the navel. So the whole bottom half of the body is rooted in earth. And then we can connect to the sky. Just feeling for a moment a sense of lightness. And it's as if the loving sky is just raining down this loving, healing light. And it rains down on the crown of the head. And it begins to just move through the head, over the shoulders, through the chest cavity, until that loving, healing energy meets also at the core of the body, the navel. And as we breathe here, feeling how body is relaxed and without any effort at all, perfectly balanced between the sky and the earth. And from this space, with whatever you're experiencing today in your life, lately, just simply into this moment, noticing what you're feeling in your body. So you may notice there's a particular part of your body that's kind of calling out for attention. That may be through tension, it may be through experiencing emotion, like a pain. There's no right answers or wrong answers here. Notice where your attention goes in your body. So we may just simply rest our attention there, or sometimes it can be helpful to actually bring one of your hands and place a palm over that part of the body. And just noticing what this part of the body is feeling like. Maybe where it's like, oh, it's holding, it's pulling into something small, or it feels like it's bouncing all over the place. I mean, there's no right answer. So we notice what it's doing. And then we may invite it, always with the sense of, if anything ever feels like too much, it doesn't feel safe, then we will honor the body and we'll say, that's okay, we've heard you. We're not going to push anything. But as we connect to this part of body, we might invite it to get as big as it needs to get, this feeling or these sensations. getting as big as it needs to get. And just noticing as you give it permission to get as big as it needs to, what happens if anything changes, if it moves, if it gets quieter or a bit more louder. And we may ask this sensation or this emotion, when is the first time I felt this way? Is this new? Have I never felt this way before? Or is this an old feeling, familiar? Oh, I know this. It's familiar. Just gently asking, when's the first time I felt this way? You don't have to go on any big search. If something comes to you, there may be a memory there. You can allow it. If nothing comes, just being with the sensations. And as we visit either this specific memory or this familiar feeling, we're connecting with the inner child. We may be connecting with this vulnerable, needy part of ourselves, which is beautiful. So as we do, we may ask the inner child or this innocence, is there anything you need? What would make you feel safe? What can I tell you or do for you that would make you feel safe right now? This isn't a concept, just right now, what can you provide? And as we listen, you may discover there's a need to be held or hugged, or there may be words that the inner child or this innocence within is needing to hear. And that may be words like, it's okay to feel this way. You can feel this way as long as you need to. I love you. I'm not going anywhere. It's safe to be here right now. You're beautiful. I'm sorry that I left you before, but I'm here with you now, and I will not ever leave you like that again. I want to hear everything you have to say. I love you. You don't need to do anything. It's safe. So just notice if any of those words resonated. Usually we may spend more time having a conversation with that self, seeing how the inner child responds. Just simply letting those words or that experience of presence of yourself with this inner child, this innocence, wash over you. And let's just rest in that for a moment. Taking a few gentle breaths, feeling how the body feels, and allowing it to feel this way. And then gently, when you're ready, you may take a deep breath and slowly blink the eyes open. And as we do, we might just look around the room, taking in the objects around us to gently invite the awareness to arrive back, sitting here. Yeah.
Wow, that was
For you, Shira.
interesting and wonderful and very and also putting the hand there and really giving it that warmth and that love. So nice.
Oh, yeah.
And the confirmations you were saying, you realize there's that resistance to be so kind to yourself.
Oh, yeah. Right. Absolutely. Because I think it's different for everyone, but I do feel there's some fear that, if I'm kind to myself, if I let myself off the hook, right, then
soft,
am I gonna like be unproductive? Am I just gonna fall apart? Am I gonna, it's like we rely on this meanness in order to
continue
and be successful in whatever way, whether that be with career or love or life. What if we don't need meanness? And nurture ourselves and move forward with creativity rather than mean productivity demands.
And that curiosity and vulnerability to experience what arises. Absolutely. Without labeling or judging or
that's why I find it helpful, the simplicity of inviting a sensation or a feeling, which really are very similar, if not the same, to get as big as it wants to.
Yes, I love that. Yes.
Because that's releasing the hold that resistance has, right? And it's like, I often find it's counterintuitive that if I invite a feeling to get as big as it needs to, it does for a moment and then it dissipates.
Exactly. You release it, and it's funny, it is counterintuitive, but it's what you said, it's something we've suppressed or repressed, and it's become so concentrated, and that's why it's painful. And then when you said that, let it grow, I was like also afraid to let it grow, but then I let it be really big, because I say it to my students or clients is take up space, allow yourself to be big. Don't cower, don't make yourself small.
Absolutely.
And why not this feeling too?
It's the judgment of the feeling that is even more painful than the feeling, because the judgment is saying that's bad, you shouldn't feel that way, or it's scary, you shouldn't feel that way. But when we have permission to feel whatever we feel, it's okay to feel this way. It's okay. That's a mantra I say to myself. It's okay. Which is kind of like, simplified. It's okay to feel this way, or let your feeling get as big as it needs to. When you have that, there's such a generosity towards self, and it's then safe to be you. It's safe to be you feeling what you feel. The judgment creates an unsafety within, and that's what's scary.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Keiren. Thank you.
My absolute joy and pleasure. Thank you, Shira.
Yeah. And do you want to leave people with where they can find you, what you do?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I, as Shira mentioned, I live in Mexico City, but my work is online. So I work with clients worldwide. I do see some people in person here, but mainly worldwide. So I do work with people, for single sessions or for programs. And you can find my work and my programs and book even a free session with me to see if it's work that resonates for you on my website, which is KeirinBrown.com. I'm sure Shira will put it down because I know my first name's a little challenging to spell.
Or in the show notes.
Yeah, exactly. Or you can also reach me on my Instagram, which I do post pretty regularly, which is Keirin Brown.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I loved meeting you. I loved learning from you. Thank you so much.
Same. Thank you for having me and for everything that you've shared. It's been a really deep and connected conversation, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, me too. Okay, everyone, we'll say goodbye. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. I know you could be doing a million things, and so I'm very grateful. you everyone for staying to the end of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I really love doing these talks with these amazing people. And if you want to know more, just take a look in the show notes. There's plenty of links and ways to connect with either the guest or myself. If you want to work with us or find out more about us, just check out the information in the show notes. So I hope you have a wonderful weekend or week, and you'll be hearing from me next week. Bye.